reading and studying. You can share.
All right, good evening. Thank you all for coming tonight, and for those of you at home who are joining us by live stream, hello to you. Glad that you all could come together. So just a little bit about why I wanted to hold this little thing. General Conference happened. Major changes happened. They were big, and we haven't talked about it. We haven't addressed it, had a forum about it to talk about it. Nobody's asked me any questions, though. And I don't really know the ins and outs of what happened at General Conference. I wanted to kind of go there. I didn't for a couple of reasons. One, because of the big funeral we had and some other stuff that came up. But so many things happened. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I know about some of the big changes that happened. And I am going to try very hard to be informative, right? And not opinionated. And I'm going to tell you what I don't know, because there are things coming out of General Conference that we don't know, that decisions were made that we don't know the full effect of yet, right? And that's always the case, but more so this time around for some hot button issues. So anyway, just going to talk a little bit about that. So thank you all for coming tonight. We've got about, how many we got about here? 20, a little bit, 20 or so, and more. Come on in, y'all. So we have about 20 folks here. And how many we got online, Josh? 6 so far. All right, 6 so far. Good. So the first thing I want to do tonight is to show you a video that was sent to me by Carolyn Coram, and it's quite good. It's done by the United Methodist News Service, and it's about General Conference. And the good news, 10 minutes long. How about that? So will this get seen by folks at home? Good. All right, so here we go. This is the video from General Conference, and it's just kind of a brief rundown of what happened, okay?
I hereby declare that the postponed 2020 General Conference is now adjourned. Amen.
Beginning April 23rd, 2024, delegates from across our worldwide connection came together for the United Methodist Church's General Conference in Charlotte, North Carolina. Let's see what happened.
Loving every bit, the worship, the preaching.
The one thing that we do better than anybody I know is worship together.
Every worship service I've been in has just been spectacular, and that's the wrong word. It's built my faith.
Are you ready to be the people that God needs for us to be? Let's go.
There's just a lot of hope going around, and it makes me very happy to be here, and it makes me happy for where the church, I hope, is headed.
How people are talking together, how people are praying together, singing together. People are more open to relationship, to learning about each other, to learning about issues.
It's a good experience being here too to discuss issue moving our church forward.
This feels like community and the church and fullness and wholeness.
This is an opportunity for a new beginning, and there's so much hope that I've seen during this General Conference.
General Conference is the prime decision-making body and the only organization that can speak on behalf of the United Methodist Church. Effective decision-making is grounded in effective communication.
That helps reinforce the vision of the church and also our identity as United Methodists. What we're trying to do is democratize access to information.
Our role is to be the trumpet for this entire denomination globally and highlight all of the work that's happening around the world. And we remain very committed to that mission.
I've learned that it's a very connectional church.
Our agencies can help live our mission beyond the local church. It's a great opportunity for us to expand a lot of the ministry beyond our borders.
The General Conference offers an opportunity to celebrate the strength of witness we build through our connectional United Methodist system.
We had the commissioning for new missionaries from GBGM, from everywhere to everywhere.
I present our new missionaries commissioned to service on behalf of the United Methodist Church.
We're an organization that's been mandated through the church, through the Book of Discipline, to engage the church, hold the church accountable, while also building up resources and thinking through what it means to be a church that is equitable and just.
I'm representing Christian Unity and the Council of Bishops.
We've been working with Church and Society, with GBHEM, of course with G-Corps, with Discipleship Ministries.
Gracious and loving God, our hearts are full today because this is your day.
The church is growing and it is on the move.
The Holy Spirit is moving and birthing a church that we always knew was there.
We have not only worshiped, we have commissioned missionaries. We have engaged in receiving petitions that have to do with acts of repentance for heinous acts. We've tended to conversations about healing for people who are the victims of sexual violence.
Today, we're observing the Thursdays in Black campaign. So it's a global movement to end all forms of sexual violence and gender-based violence.
When we came into General Conference, there were many who were concerned about the 3 R's: regionalization, revised social principles, and removing restrictive language.
It is moved to adopt calendar item number 22, worldwide regionalization. Calendar item number 22 has been approved.
It's a very good step towards a collaboration as one people, as one family.
We used to be a U.S. church with satellites in different parts of the world. Now we'll become a truly global church where we relate to each other on a more equal level.
We are a beautiful, diverse, international, worldwide church. And the regionalization plan is a reflection of what that looks like.
Today, we have taken a journey whereby every region within our church will be on the same level.
We don't want anybody to be at the center except for our Lord Jesus Christ, and all of us will exist with total equity, sharing the gifts and the resources that we may offer to each other.
The affirmative has it, and the motion is adopted.
Delegates without debate passed an end to a 40-year-old ban on self-avowed practicing homosexuals from being clergy.
We passed the removal of this ban on gay clergy with an overwhelming 93% affirmative vote, a signal of a new period of unity in our church.
We have more traditional people, we have more progressive people, we have people with different views, but we're open to everyone. And now we are truly open to everyone. It's an exciting day for the United Methodist Church.
To me, this is just a reflection of the truth about the church that I've always known.
It is a day of celebration, a day that I have a sense of peace and of joy.
Maybe for the first time when we say open hearts, open minds, open doors, we are consistent with our message. Like, we really mean it this time.
This has really been a 12-year effort to revise these social principles, and our goal, as directed by the General Conference, was to make them more concise, more theologically grounded, and reflective of our worldwide denomination as we begin this next chapter of United Methodism.
I have felt a real sense of our commitment to personal holiness and social holiness.
We're serious about helping people come to find Christ, to know Christ, and then to go live out their faith in the world in a way that sees the kingdom of God come on earth as it is in heaven.
It was an amazing undertaking.
People all over the church and the world have been working on it.
Well, we're really excited to have a completely brand new judicial council who can help walk us through the process of regionalization. We're also very excited that we've been able to enter into an official communion agreement with the Episcopal Church. We're also working on our commitment to Christian unity and reconciliation by developing an official agreement to create an apology on behalf of the United Methodist Church for our involvement in the overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy. We also just passed the smallest budget in the history of the General Conference. The U.S. jurisdictions have agreed to no elections for the time being, and a total of 32 U.S. bishops allocated across the jurisdictions. And deacons finally have sacramental authority in ministry contexts.
Calendar item number 554 is adopted. This is an historic moment.
We are registering people for the General Conference.
I am a marshal.
I'm here on an official monitoring for GCOS role.
I'm serving as a translator and interpreter for Portuguese and English.
Clergy delegate from the Mountain Sky Conference.
I'm serving as a page.
Each session of General Conference is streamed live, and every day over 1,000 people participate in General Conference as a delegate, observer, or volunteer.
There is a lot going on in the plenary, but there is a lot also that's going on behind the scenes, like communications-wise and all the logistics. So we thank you very much for everyone who's helping out making this happen.
We have a very different church. We are moving forward as a different church. This is a new day.
There's a bright hope for the future and for the church as well.
We are having a new set of mindset of change for everyone to feel inclusive.
The most important thing about Methodism to me is the being able to be connected with people who are different than us and agreeing on these most important things.
I think the main thing is we continue to reach souls for Jesus Christ. That always has been part of our Methodism, our connection.
It's a delight to watch the United Methodist Church move with confidence and energy and boldness into the future. To me, that's what it means to be UMC.
Yes, we are excited about our future. God is doing a new thing. There is a renewed hope and a renewed focus in the life of our church as we continue to expand our witness for Jesus Christ and live into our mission of making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world.
So that wasn't hard, was it? It was just 10 minutes. You thought it was just going to be, looking at legislation together. Yeah, I thought that was really great. Thank you, Carolyn, for sharing me with that. Were you a marshal? Oh, I thought you were given power to, correct and arrest people and all kinds of things. I got you. Yeah, they should have given you a badge for sure. So. Okay, so listen, would you all please agree with me to do this, okay? People at home will not hear you. They are not going to hear you. It's not going to come through the live stream. They want to hear you and your question. So if you got a question, raise your hand, and we're going to pass this to you. Make sense? All right. All right. No, you didn't. You can't say it unless you have the mic. All right. She said yes. All right. So, hey, Jennifer. All right. So let's, as we get into this, why don't we have just a word of prayer to open up. Gracious God, we ask that we be mindful of your presence in our midst, and that you teach us a little bit about what happened and what it holds for the future, and help us all to begin the process of trying to understand and to think about what this might mean for us here at Ardmore Church, the opportunities and perhaps the challenges that we may be facing as General Conference turned a page in the history of our denomination. And we ask that you be with us and give us guidance and wisdom and a real good listening heart. We pray this in your holy name. Amen. All right. I meant to get this too. Forgot this. We have this thing, it's called the Book of Discipline. Do you all know about that? All right, maybe you don't. So the Book of Discipline is our book of order. It's our law book. And it has in there a little bit of everything about how Methodists get organized. My father once asked a question to a Catholic priest, and he said, you know, my church is probably the most overly organized church except for your church. and he was basically asking, how in the world is the Spirit supposed to break through, you know? And he didn't have a good answer for it, but it was a good question. And it made me think about that a lot, because we are very organized. And for a while there, all we did was just keep adding language and language and language and layers and layers and layers of new information and new changes that were happening. So it all went into what is called the Book of Discipline. And in the Book of Discipline, it has three big parts to it that you should be aware of. One of them is a whole section about doctrinal standards. And a lot of those come directly from John Wesley about how the churches should be organized. There's a whole other section called the social principles, and that got a lot of changes this year. And so it's sort of like, how are you the church out into the world? And what does it mean for us to be a church in the world? And then the third part is just all of the rules and laws, how churches are supposed to take offerings, how we pay for apportionments, how pastors are appointed, and how credentials that pastors are supposed to have. All these layers and layers and layers of things. I had a friend well, he became a friend, but he was somebody I was trying to hire for an assistant pastor position. And he said to us in the committee, I said, you know what? You know, tell us a little bit about yourself. Do you have hobbies? Do you like to read? He goes, yeah, I do like to read. I said, what do you like to read? He goes, I love to read the United Methodist Discipline. I was like, you're going to sit there and lie to us? If you want to go to sleep, that's the book that you read. Now, there are good parts of it. There are some good stuff in there, but you got to look for it. You got to look, and you got to wade through it. And some of the legalese is difficult. Now, how do you change something that's in the Book of Order? General Conference. It's the only body that can change the Book of Discipline. It can only get changed every 4 years. So the last one that we had was in 2016. We did have, we had elected people to go to 2020, but we didn't hold it because of COVID. And so everything got delayed and pushed, and there was an opportunity and a window for churches that wanted to get out of the denomination, and this was all kind of coming about. So then the more conservative wings of our churches, the Good News Movement, the Wesley Covenant Association, Institute for Democracy and Faith, those groups all took off and organized. They've been organizing on this for about 30 years. So this was not a surprise, although we didn't necessarily hear about it from the pulpit all the time. So the disaffiliation process, we just got passed. This is the first general conference since 2016. So now we had opportunities to change language in the discipline, okay? So we have to abide by those rules that are in after each of the book of disciplines are put in place, and now we're abiding under new rules. Now, don't get too excited because we don't have copies of the Book of Discipline for you all tonight, okay? Sorry about that. But so they're not printed, And one of the reasons why is because we are in so many different countries worldwide that they have to be translated. And God bless the translators for that language to translate. So that's kind of what the General Conference is about. It's how we organize ourselves as the church, where the church stands on things, and all kinds of rules, especially around clergy and for churches to be organized. So you heard this. The big three issues were the three R's, right? You know what they are? What are they? Regionalization is one. Is there another one? Removal of language is another. And there's a third one. What was it? A removal of bans. So those are the three basic things. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to dive into the biggest issue that hit the news, and that is around sexuality issues. And the reason I'm saying that is because the one that's got the most press, and it's the biggest shift that we have kind of gone through. So it was at the very beginning of conference, one of the things they do is you don't have a lot of legislation for the first few days because they go into committees. And the committees will vote on petitions that are all before them and changes. And while they're working on those, sometimes they'll combine them. So you might have like 5 petitions to change things in the budget, actually, probably about 150. And some of them overlap, so they combine them together, and so they get them down so that you don't have to vote on 150 things, you can only vote on a few. And then a lot of the things that are changes are not necessarily controversial, so they go through the committee, and the committee votes, and if the committee votes to a 3/4 majority, I think that's the number, then it goes on to what is called the consent calendar. The consent calendar has all of those petitions. Everybody that's there looks at their big, huge, heavy books, then they're looking through all of those petitions, and if their petition is on there, then it can go to the consent calendar. The consent calendar is up or down. You can take something off the consent calendar, or you can leave it on there, and then it's voted on. So when that vote happened, that was a huge vote because it changed a lot of things for the church immediately. All of the bans about gay and lesbian clergy were removed. And it was on the consent calendar. Again, that's an indication that a wide majority had already assumed that not only in the big body, but also in the committee. And so they went through that. I'll tell you a little bit about that. But there was another vote that happened before this. At the conference, one day after delegates had voted, they voted to repeal a 52-year-old declaration that said, the practice of homosexuality is, and I quote, incompatible with Christian teaching. Okay? It was put in the Book of Discipline in 1972. And in 1972, homosexuality was thought to be a psychological disorder, and it was illegal in a majority of states in America. So it was a different world back then. Getting it out of the discipline took a lot of effort and many, many tries over time to try to get it out. So what we found, I'm giving you a little history of what happened in the last 20 years. What we found was that we had a larger group of conservative United Methodists that were not the majority in the United States, but they coupled with, oftentimes with the African delegation and some delegations from Korea, and they made a majority. And it was a pretty wide majority for a long time, but it kept shrinking over time. And in 2016, we thought that had a shot of that, but it passed it to retain that language by 52%. Okay? So, what made the change between 2016 and this year? Disaffiliation. Okay? So the disaffiliations that happened, there was also another shift, and that was that actually the African delegation voted to remove that language as well by about 55%. Now it wasn't a separate vote for them. But their participation was at the rate of about 55%. Why did the African delegation do that? You have to imagine that if you're in Africa, like our 1970s, in Africa, you have cultural bans on homosexuality. You also have legal bans on homosexuality. And so that is what is being faced there. So when they're talking about gay and lesbian people, they're not in the same place as we are culturally on that. And so that was a tension around it. Came to 2024, though, the vote was taken. Again, it was overwhelming. It was 447 to 233. That was just for that removal of that language, okay?
So that being the difference happened in 8 years, I guess.
Happened in 8 years. And it happened because of disaffiliation. But the other thing that happened, why did it change so much in Africa? Why did Africa shift so much to 55% in favor of removing the language? They saw, through the process of disaffiliation and those organizations that I was telling you about lobbying, it really turned off the African bishops. And they knew that they were being manipulated and that they might be left out to dry, and so they took a different stance on that. Not because they necessarily agreed with it. They weren't saying that they were trying to be pro-gay. They were just taking the language out because they understood to be sensitive to the whole denomination. So it was kind of it was a huge shift. So along with that, the things that happened is there was another vote for the consent calendar. So it wasn't debated, it was just voted on, straightforward, and to the tune of 78%, that was adopted. It was, and all of those things on the consent calendar. I'm gonna tell you some of these that were on it. It removed a ban on annual conferences and denominational agencies from giving Methodist funds to any gay caucus group. There was restrictions. You weren't allowed to use any kind of conference district money to promote reconciling ministries or any other groups that might be doing ministry through the Methodist Church. It eliminated requirement of the General Counsel and Finance Administration to enforce that ban. It striked the ban on boards and ordained ministry from considering candidates that were self-avowed practicing gay people. I'm using some technical language there in the discipline. Self-avowed practicing homosexuals, but gay people. So it strike that. Strike the requirement that bishops rule that gay candidates are ineligible. So these were a number of things in language that were being practiced because of the language that was in the discipline. It erased a penalty for at least 1 year suspension without pay for clergy that were found guilty of officiating at same-sex weddings or unions. You know, we had a lot of people that tried to buck that, and some of them lost their clergy credentials, and many of them were put on suspension for a year, and had to do something else while they were waiting to be reinstated. So that was those challenges that were kind of trying to push the church. Those were taken away so that the bishops were not to do that. Now, I will say, friends, that in the Methodist Church, those rules that were put in place were often interpreted in different ways. And one of the things that made so many people angry was it wasn't automatic, because bishops were interpreting it in different ways in different conferences, okay? So, just know that whole cycle of protest actions that were being done and challenges, as well as that's done because of this action. Those things were, hang on just a minute, I'm gonna go through one more. And then finally, it allows any gay clergy in good standing to be appointed across annual conference lines, and sent a moratorium on judicial proceedings related to denominations' bans against all those things that I was saying, same-sex weddings and self-avowed practicing gay clergy, all right? So I know I went through a lot of stuff, but those are all of the kind of issues that we've been facing in the church about issues that have both come around through clergy, gay and lesbian clergy, and also same-sex marriage.
Are those pastors that are still been taken out of the pulpit, whatever, and lost their compensation, is all that being turned over immediately?
Yes, but there's probably a process of bringing them back into standing. But so, for instance, if they've gone to serve in other churches, other denominations, they could transfer back into the United Methodist Church. They may not want to. Yeah, if that was the issue, that would be overturned. So I think, though, that I don't know what the process would be if you had been, had your credentials removed, that it would be reinstated. Really, since 2020, most bishops, not all, basically decided that they were not going to process any more complaints. So and they had the right to do that from some General Conference action. So they said, yeah, we're not going to do this until it's not fair that just because COVID interrupted the General Conference that this didn't get resolved to process these on old rules. And so they just had a kind of bishops mostly followed a moratorium on doing that. So there weren't a lot of people on suspension for 1 year at this time. But yeah, some of that's being done. Yeah. That's a lot I threw at you, I know. I was reading some stuff, but I'm trying to get to you some of the language that's in the legislation that was passed, and to try to get some clarity around all of those issues. Any questions, Shane? Yeah.
So I noticed that you mentioned lesbian and gay. As part of the LGBTQ community, there's also bisexual, transgender, and queer.
Right.
So is there a distinction in the language, or is that just where you went with the language? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm interested in looking at the Book of Discipline to find out. The ancient language of 1972, homosexuality is not a word that is used by the gay and lesbian community. So that's problematic just for the gay and lesbian people. We had a few situations in the conference. We had one in our conference that was a person that transitioned to female, and the district took action, and he resigned. It was just too much pressure. She resigned, but she's down in Charlotte now, serving in a UCC church, and very happy and doing great. And she and her wife, actually, they stayed married, believe it or not, through all of that. Do talks on that. So what I will say is, one person I saw on a conference said this: we do not have language in the Book of Discipline that calls for an end to anti-oppressive policies for the LGBTQ community. So my guess is there's not updated language for that. I don't know. I know in the Book of Discipline, I'm sure they'd spell out every word, but then they'd have to redefine it. And, as I was joking with somebody today, it's like, how many letters does the gay and lesbian community have? And I was like, well, what time is it? I mean, when the communities that have been so excluded for so long, trying to show their difference from each other, those letters become important, and any catch-all phrases, that don't quite do it. And so that's why we've got this, the alphabet, basically working on that. Good question. That's my guess, but I haven't seen the language yet. Thank you. Yeah. Other questions about that? Yeah, Earl.
I don't know if this is going to be in the Book of Discipline, but isn't there also a plus symbol to all those letters, just in case they miss something?
All right. Now, I'm going to do something very daring for a 58-year-old man. I'll try to break down the letters for you all. Last I read, I think that the major ones were LGBTQIAA+. Now, what do they stand for? Lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, right? And trans is a big umbrella, okay? I mean, you can be a trans man, a trans woman, and you can be non-binary. That's not even in the list, right? I didn't even say that one. And then Q is the word queer. For those of you that may not know this, gay men over probably the age of 75 do not like that term, but it has been reclaimed by young people who want to identify themselves as different, whether it means in gender or sexuality. And then I can't remember what the IAAs are. Intersexual, asexual, what's that? Intersex, asexual. There's another A. Anyway, so advocate maybe is another one. Yeah. So there's a lot of them, and you said plus. So sometimes if you put the plus on that, that means we're not trying to exclude anybody, but we just don't know the letters right now. So that's my guess. Good question. Yeah. And again, I don't think you're going to find that in the discipline yet. I don't think that we've wrestled that out, how to say that, because, again, we're going to do that. We probably will. Well, I'll get to the regionalization. It'll probably come out in that way, but it's when the U.S. does their part in it, and you'll find some of that language in there, but not yet. They haven't gotten there yet. So part of it was really just the removal of language. Was enough. So one other issue that is related to all of this is same-sex marriages. Here's the language that I heard that is adopted at General Conference. Clergy are neither prohibited nor required to perform a same-gender wedding. And the church is neither prohibited nor required to host such a wedding. Okay? So, clergy can preside at a wedding if they want to. It is their choice. It's their designation. And if it goes against the clergy's own views on that, then they don't have to. If the church decides that they do not want to host a wedding, then the church, the congregation, gets to decide that, okay? If that they would say no to that. So now let me just say, when the removal of the language means we're less oppressive, that doesn't mean it's less messy. The General Conference just gave it back to us as a local church. So if and when that comes up as a request, then that may be something that we have to wrestle with. And yes, I got an email today wanting to know from a gay man who wanted to see if we would allow weddings in our sanctuary. I don't know if they're curious or if they actually want to do a wedding. I haven't called him back yet. I thought I'd talk to you first. So one of the questions that you may have about that is, how is that decision made? And I'm not really sure yet. I think legalistically, Josh is going to love this, it would be the Board of Trustees. He put his head in his shirt. Not church council. I don't know. I think that they don't know, Leslie, is the question. So how many of y'all watched that video with Bishop Ken Carter? He skirted this issue a little bit, right? And what he said was a process is being developed for the congregation to come to that decision. But ultimately, I think that the use of property for something is an issue that would have to come before the trustees. So that's the deal from what I understand. And I'm not trying to get legalistic about it. I'm just trying to be honest. That's how I understand it. I talked with my retired bishop friend and quizzed him about it too. And he goes, well, it's the trustees. I was like, really? He goes, kind of. I mean, And for churches that we'll have to wrestle with that on some level, where that decision kind of comes to. But I do think that it's worthy of a process for the whole church to talk about. We'll need some guidance in how to do that, and so we'll look at that when it comes. So, yeah, yes.
I'm not trying to make a power play because I'm church council chair, but I just feel like if we do have some conversations around it, I think it's very important that it be a diverse representative group, which I don't feel is necessarily what trustees is. Not saying anything against trustees, but the trustees is a much smaller group, and they're focused more on property and et cetera, where church council is representative of all the groups of the church and also have members at large. So I would just have a bit of an issue if it comes down that way, that we maybe talk about how it's more fully represented of the congregation and not just one committee.
I'm in total agreement with you on this, Leslie. I don't know what the process is.
Yeah,
And
who do I need to talk to?
Yeah.
I'm joking.
I've been asking because, but you know, the General Conference doesn't get to, really doesn't do good on those kinds of questions, you know, and getting the details down for us. They're not going to get clear about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and Leslie, I'll add one thing as the chair of the Board of Trustees. I would also make the argument that church council is not representative of the church.
Yeah.
We have many, many people, especially our former Trinity friends that are here, who aren't represented on any committee. So my opinion is it's bigger than church council.
I agree. Yeah, and I think that we want to feel like what we have a clear sense about what the great majority of the church is on that issue. We just need that. And so again, part of this responsibility is that we have that responsibility as a congregation to be able to talk across our lines of difference, our lines of different understanding. I will say this, you know, I haven't, you know, been at a church that made a decision to not do any weddings until everybody could get married. The people that were most upset about that were parents of 20-year-olds that that their kids were starting to date seriously, and they always envisioned that they might be at their church, you know, and they didn't like that. And of course, by this time, all of their kids were ready to get married in barns all around the city. So there were so few churches. Having said that, Ardmore has a great long center aisle, you know. So people are going to want that entrance, and that's understandable. So we need to be clear about that, but we want to be careful about how we do that, and be super respectful that people are going to be in different parts. And you know, my view is that the fewer votes that any church has to take is better. That if we can kind of come to some type of consensus, and we can do some of that, I think, together. I'm committed to really being the pastor of everybody in this church, in your views. I really like the article I gave you out about the traditional pastor that was returning and feeling a place in it. He got, you know, voted no on lots of all of those things that I listed. So, but he still feels very United Methodist and proud of the church where it is, and was grateful that General Conference felt like it did in this video, as opposed to how it felt in 2016, so divided. So, you know, again, I think that turning the page from the disaffiliation had happened. So I wanted to share that with you, because before you asked the question, and I don't have an answer for it because we don't know, there's not an answer there for that yet. Okay. Any other questions that come to mind around sexuality issues, the umbrella, LGBTQIA issues? No? All right. So let's see. Yeah, I'll come back to this. Regionalization. We talked about the other two. Now we're going to talk about regionalization. What's the issue with regionalization? Well, if churches in the United States wanted to address something legislatively with their churches, with their pastors, and they wanted to address it and put it in the book of discipline, well, they couldn't unless it went to the full General Conference. But there are sections, there are adapted books of discipline for certain regions in the world. Africa has 3 different regions. Inside of Africa is that big in the church, and they hold a conference 2 years after General Conference, and they can adapt to things that address their culture and their needs for their place in the world. Okay, and it allows them to have some autonomy and the ability to do that. The regionalization vote was to actually extend that, not just to the United States, but also to other parts of the world, in Asia and in Europe, so that they could each gather and have regionalization gatherings. That is where I think you're going to see the LGBTQ language spelled out more, because and so that it would be matching United States legislation, probably. Okay? So the regionalization vote, I want to say a few things about this. Regionalization does not mean that everything that is decided at the regional level. 25% of the Book of Discipline has to be decided at General Conference. But certain things within the discipline about how clergy are moved, where clergy live, the salary levels, all of those kinds of things that are dictated in the Book of Discipline, they can be addressed in the regions in which they live, in different economies. Every place outside the United States, by the way, has a regional conference. We've created more regions so that there are more of them, but the United States was excluded from that. Understandably so, because we were the majority. We had 55% of the vote at General Conference. And also, regionalization required that it get passed at a 2/3 vote in the General Conference body, the 66%, and it passed at 78%. One critique that you might be reading, especially from our friends in the Good News movement, is that there were 100 folks that didn't make it to General Conference. Almost all of them came from not from Africa, that didn't get there. If they had all been there and they all voted against it, it still would have passed at 68%. So it was definitive in the vote at General Conference. It was estimated that 55% of the African members voted for regionalization. If that percentage went with the people that weren't there, it clearly would have been more like 70%, 75. So I did a little research on some of this. I thought this was really interesting. While most of Africa has a cultural legal bias against the LGBTQ inclusion, delegates from Africa did not see those issues as a breaking point in the church. Does it make sense? They didn't say that was not the issue to break up over it, okay? So as our culture has really shifted and changed in the United States over the past 20, 30 years on this issue, lightning fast in the last 15, it's been slower in other regions of the world. But is that an essential thing, or is it something that could be tolerated? In 2016, the One Church Plan failed, and the reason that it failed, there was a compromise, and actually Bishop Ken Carter was a big proponent of that, of actually making it happen. But the reason that it failed is because they only included one African bishop, and he died before they got to General Conference. So it wasn't inclusive enough, and it didn't feel like enough say-so in it. So that's, it was bad planning on the part of the leaders to kind of put all that together. They were scrambling, under a time frame, but that was a piece of it. The other thing that emerged over the last few years is an organization called Mainstream United Methodist Church. Does anybody get those emails from them? So they're really good, a good source. You can just look up Mainstream UMC, and you'll find probably some people attacking them, but you'll also find ways to get on their mailing list. And I get something every 2-3 days, and it lays stuff out, it explains stuff. It's not bad, it's good stuff. And they know that the church is not all left-leaning or right-leaning, that, the major people are in the middle and in the center. Mainstream did more for this legislation to get passed in General Conference than Reconciling Ministries, which was, had a different role, but Mainstream was really about educating and getting information in people's hands. Anyway, they built great credibility with the African bishops. So that 55% of African bishops voting for this, that's why. They saw that, plus they had this. Observers from the Wesley Covenant Association, they made the African delegates disillusioned, and so, difficult. Let's see, what else was I going to tell you? Oh, so here's the other tricky thing about regionalization. The vote passed, but in order for it to happen, it changes the Constitution in the Book of Discipline. And in order to change the Constitution part of the discipline, it requires a 2/3 aggregate number of delegates at all of the annual conferences in the world. So they will all need to approve it for a constitutional amendment. So in other words, it passed at General Conference. Now it's going to every annual conference, and every annual conference will vote on it. Here's the sad news about this, is that we won't know until 2025. So we won't even get to vote on it until a year from June. So we just, as a big church, you don't move that fast. It's kind of like trying to turn a ship around, No. So that's a little bit about that, the regionalization. So the U.S. will be, this was an interesting thing that someone shared that I thought was really helpful. It was at one of the briefings. In 2028, the United States will only represent about 45%, if all the trends stay the same, 45% of the United Methodist Church. The majority would be outside the United States, just Philippines, Korea, Africa, Europe. So we are in the middle of a shift, and we've known this for years, that the part of the church that is growing the fastest is in Africa, and the fastest shrinkage is happening in the United States. So while the United Methodist Church, the Methodist Episcopal Church really was an American invention, then with missionaries expanded around the world, it's really even more of a worldwide church. I used to say global, but I can't say that anymore. So, all right. So, yeah, that's the news. That's what I got on that. Any questions about the regionalization? I will say that the regionalization is controversial for our brothers and sisters that disaffiliated, because they were trying to push a lot of the other churches to disaffiliate and continue disaffiliations to happen, and to not make, and they wanted a top-down decision to say that that could happen, and it didn't, because the regionalization allowed the African groups to say no more disaffiliation. So there's tension around all of that, but I do think that the regionalization is going to actually make us build healthier relationships, in mission relationships in the world, because we'll be able to respect and have some integrity about our own local regions that we are a part of. And I think that seems to be the spirit of what was coming out of General Conference. It is about the LGBTQ issue, but it's not only that. And one of the things that the worst thing that we could do as United Methodists is to cut off our relationship to these countries where the United Methodist Church is, and we need to strengthen those, and we need to understand how wealthy we are in our country. We may not feel wealthy, but compared to these other countries, we are, and so this is not a time for us to say a regionalization that we're not going to pay attention to our worldwide denomination. I want to tell you one story. Some of y'all know this. I know Sandy has been very active with Project Agape, and some of you all have been active in, stuff with UMCOR. When I heard a report about 10 years ago from somebody in the Red Cross that was going internationally to all these hotspot zones, wherever there was a flood, wherever there was an earthquake, and the Red Cross was going in there. And we were talking to this person that said, do you have any contact with UMCOR? And they go, well, actually, we tried to get in the Philippines and they wouldn't let us in, but UMCOR got us in. So when a disaster in the world happens, your money that you put in the offering plate goes to an organization, UMCOR, that is outstanding. And it is a shining jewel in our denomination. And so to help that get to the places where it is need in the world is a big issue. It's not something we talk about all the time. It's hard to know those stories and to make them personal so people get to them, but they're so important. I just wanted you to know about that. I felt like the General Conference, from what I could see in this video and others, really doubled down on those kind of commitments, and I thought that that was good. So I want to mention a few other things that came through General Conference, and then we'll stop and let's see what you all want to talk about. One of the things that changed was sacramental authority has been given to deacons. Now, so we have, in the United Methodist Church at this time, we have 2 orders of ordination, elders and deacons. Elders are appointed to their places, and they are under the bishop's rule about that. Deacons go and find their own work. Many deacons serve in nonprofits, some serve as Christian educators, some serve in churches as business administrators or something like that. So there's a lot of ways that deacons serve, because that's the term, service is the term deacon. But, so what we used to say is elders are ordained for word, sacrament, and order, and deacons are for word and service. So now it's word, service, and sacrament, okay? So we still have those 2. The advantage of being a deacon would be that you don't have to go where the bishop tells you to go. The disadvantage is you got to go find your own place to serve. And that's not a problem for some, but it is a difficulty. So anyway, we do have that. I think it's a great move. I had a friend who was they called them diaconal ministers back in the day, and she was leaving she was going to become an elder. And she wrote a paper, and she said in her paper, you know, if the spoken word is the music of ordination, getting to serve the sacrament is the dance. And she says, and I want to dance, which was pretty good. I would have ordained her right there, so I thought that was cool. Anyway, that's one issue that changed. There are lots of things that are happening that I do not understand. You know, you think our budget is hard to read? Try reading the General Conference budget. But 42% reduction from the budget, that's a lot from 2016. We needed probably 60 bishops, and we only got 54 funded. So that means that some of these bishops are going to be serving in some very large regions. And again, most of that money is coming from the United States, and which is understandable because we have most of the money. So that's a challenge for us, I think, as a denomination. There is a path. Somebody asked this question on the video with Bishop and Kim. What do we do about churches that want to come back into the United Methodist fold? That's already starting to happen. What do we do with clergy that disaffiliated that want to come back? And the answer is every annual conference will develop a path for it. There is already a path in place for the board in the Book of Discipline, but specifically for United Methodist people that are disaffiliated, that'll have a separate process, and that'll happen on the conference level. They don't know yet. Just share this, if you hadn't ever read these numbers. There were 346 churches in Western North Carolina that disaffiliated. 30 churches closed and 12 churches merged. That's not unusual for that many churches to have closed during that time or the merging, but so that's about 25%. In North Carolina Conference, it was 40%. It was intense. I did not know that. The bishop told me that the other day. I was like, wow, that's a lot. So, are you saying 40% closed or 40% disaffiliated? Yeah, 40% disaffiliated. I wanted to share this. I just started reading it, but it's really well done. There's I think you can probably get this online. The Duke Endowment did a study about disaffiliation in the United Methodist Church in North Carolina, and they surveyed kind of where people are at. And it's it's very interesting. It's really interesting. Talks a little bit about where people in the disaffiliated churches are, where in the United Methodist Church. One of the things they said, which I thought was really interesting, that with the disaffiliation happening, the United Methodist Church is still very much a big tent church, meaning that we're going to have people on the far left and on the far right, but really 90% of the people are going to be in the middle somewhere. And the people in the middle are moving back and forth, so they're not easily defined. There was an article way back in 2000. They were trying to figure out where middle America was, where all these middle people were, that both Republican and Democrats were trying to figure out. How do we find out? And a big article came out. Well, you should probably go to the United Methodist churches because they're all there. It's kind of interesting. That still holds true for the United Methodist Church, although we have more shrinkage of people, especially around issues of gay and lesbian because of the disaffiliations. But we're still talking about 25% of people that clearly identify themselves as conservative in the United Methodist Church. And a lot of people are in the more moderate range. So what I wanted to say about that is, and this is really an interesting thing, they said, well, that means two things for the United Methodist Church in North Carolina. It means, on the one hand, that we might have potential for more conflict, but I think it really means that we have more of a potential opportunity to talk to each other across lines of difference. We really have the ability to, as a church, to build some beloved community across our lines of difference. I mean, ideologically, which I think is really exciting and a good challenge. And I just wanted to share that with you. It was an interesting thing to kind of come out of this study, kind of where we are. So in short, I think the General Conference turned the page on disaffiliation, and the disaffiliation time is over, no longer. We know those rules won't apply as much. That doesn't mean that people won't be leaving the church. I'm sure that they will, but they won't be leaving as a church in the same way. And we certainly won't see the huge exodus that we did see. I told the bishop, I said, I think the United Methodist Church needs to have an immediate rebranding. I mean, we need a whole new logo. We need a whole new catchphrase. We need to get out there and be loud and proud about who we are and our worldwide perspective, and claim all of those things that are who we are, which are really good and solid, and we need to tell the world about it, because we've been badmouthed by a whole lot of disinformation, and that a lot of that is just not true. And so it's time to really, march forward with that, and I think that General Conference gives us that opportunity. So, all right, I'm gonna stop. What do you all want to talk about? See any? Here we go.
Was there widespread disaffiliation in Africa as there's been here?
I don't know. That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure there was. It sounded like maybe it got stopped at a certain time over the past year because of their regionalization ability to do it, and what the Good News Movement and Wesley Covenant Association, those groups that had disaffiliated, were lobbying for was to vote down against regionalization because they didn't want that to have that power. And so they were wanting the church to say, oh no, you can't do this with regards to regionalization. So that was part of the issue with it, as I understood it. But I don't know that. I would like to know the stats. We should look at that. So it's a good question. Yeah. Who else? So I want to say this, and we can close, and if we want to just talk individually, we can. But I want to say this to all of you here and all the folks on live stream. For a good 25 years of my life, I have been in intense conversations around LGBTQ issues. I have spoken to lots of groups that have been mixed in their views. I did a forum with some clergy that, we were diametrically opposed, but we wanted to show that we could be, that we could love alike if we didn't think alike. And I've walked with people who have struggled because this was not the, LGBTQ community has challenged the way that they think about human beings and sexuality. And I just want to say, I'm really patient with that conversation. And one of the reasons I'm patient with it is because I know from so many conversations with gay, lesbian, trans people that they are not the ones that are responsible for that, but that you're going to have an easier time talking to me. I did this with my dad, who was a United Methodist clergyman, who struggled with this issue. He thought about it all the time, and he came and did a forum with me at a church in Chicago. My dad and I did, and we talked about this, and we talked about our walk together on this issue. And he said, it took me a while, but I'm getting there on this, and I really struggled with it. And then everybody in my church in Chicago came up to me afterwards and said, man, your dad, I'm so glad he was here because I'm where he is. But they came to that forum, and they understood that they were moving into a very different world. So I want to say that. If people want to have a conversation about that as a group, I'm ready to have that. Individually, I'm ready to have that with folks. And I really understand that struggle for people. The other thing I wanted to say around that is that what I believe about Ardmore, in having been here for the past 5 months, is that I've not met one person that I think would be comfortable saying, I don't want somebody who's gay or lesbian or trans to come to my church. And to me, that's a sign that, I haven't heard that, but that is a sign that we believe in inclusion more than we would ever believe in exclusion. And the decision around disaffiliation was really on that line. And that doesn't mean that we are going to welcome everybody in the same way, or help people promote what seems to be such a different life than my life, But it means that we do believe in some of those principles. So we don't all have to think alike, have the same opinions, to love alike, and that we accept people and want to welcome them. And I believe that that's true about Ardmore. I'm not saying that as a way of an agenda. I'm saying that I think that that's true about people that are not sure where they're at with the LGBTQ issues, okay? And so having walked through with that, I think that's great. Having said that, I can't, I will listen, I will help ask questions, I will help guide what I know, which has been, I've been privileged to be part of some really amazing conversations, and to help people with that individually or however they want to come. But I can't be part of saying that it's okay for people to have their prejudices against other people. But what I guess I'm saying is I don't sense any great prejudice about that from people who may be very traditional in views around sexuality. Does that make sense? So I think that, I guess what I'm saying is that what they were talking in this report about United Methodist churches being places where we could really come together, across our lines of difference and really have good, safe conversations in a public way. I'm down with that. I want that. And because I really like to have a group learn how to listen to each other, and we can do that. So I'm excited about the future and all of that. All right. Earl, you got to use mic.
It's really, to me, it's all about respect. I left a church that I loved because I no longer felt respected there because I felt different. The Holy Spirit has spoken to me different than it did to the others. That doesn't mean either side is wrong. It's just that we think different right now, and you have to respect the other person's way of thinking.
Yeah. No, I think.
And I have felt that here.
Yeah, there is a way, and it's hard. It's hard because we don't see it very often, but there is a way to respect somebody for their opinion and to disagree with it, you know? So we teach this a little bit in, there's a great song that David Wilcox has that I love, where he's talking about, you know, the differences and say, so, you know, he's explaining, so you say that when I do this, this makes you angry. And no, she says, that's not what it means. I didn't say that. Okay, all right, well, try it again. When you do this and I say that, then you say this and that makes me feel, it's like, okay. So when I say this, this makes you feel this and this. She goes, yeah. He goes, oh, good, okay. Totally disagree with that. So, now he doesn't go to the disagreement, but that's what we're talking about. There's the principle in Stephen Covey. Have you all done the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? One of them is to seek first to understand, then to be understood. And the only way to seek to understand is to reflect back to the person what you heard. And when they hear what they said to their satisfaction, then you can disagree. Then you can disagree. So I found this out, and it's been a really good practice for me because I've had people walk into my office and they're just hot and mad and angry, and so they lay it all out on me, and then I say, so you're angry about this? And they go, yeah. Like, cools down. Because they've been heard, you know. And because I didn't get defensive, right? So it can be done, you all. It can be done. And don't believe what you're seeing on all these talking heads on television. They don't do it well because they're trying to sell soap, and they've only got 2.5 minutes to have a good argument. And fire sells things, right? I mean, it's a train wreck, so that's what you want to watch, not 2 people with long kind of explanations. You know what I'm saying? But real community demands that we have the respect for each other as individuals and our differences, and that we have put in the work to listen thoroughly to each other to see where people are coming from. Because if you know where somebody is coming from and their story that brought them to where they are, then your disagreement with them, and they know that, then your disagreement with them is not a threat. It's just a difference. And, you know, we're all different from each other, so.
For the time to go through this, and hear us out, and answer questions. And I think you've done a great job.
Yeah, thank you. And
yeah, thank you.
I do want to say I sweat this a lot because, you know, I don't know where you all are on all those stuff. This was not part of my interviews with you guys when we met. And some of you were kind enough to share some things with me, but I really do believe that. I don't believe that the way we often get characterized as not being able to hear one another is true. I think it's just not true. So, and we can all learn that, and I'm down for that. But I also, I couldn't absorb everything that was going on at General Conference, and you know, I'm glad Carolyn was there to brief us. So yeah, she was sending us all kinds of information. But you know, when I do say this, and I know the video you might want to dismiss as propaganda from the United Methodist News Agency, and that's okay. But everyone that I spoke to at General Conference who had also been there at 2016 were like, wow, this is a different kind of thing. It's very, very different. So it's, after the big fight It's kind of like after a divorce, there is a relief about being able to only center on what we needed to. And now we can start working on the post-divorce relationship, which is to have as good a relationship, not just with ourselves, having gone through the turmoil, but with our neighbors, even our global Methodist churches. We may not be ready to do that right away, Sandy, but, yeah, I'm kidding you. But yeah, it's understandable. So let's the healing come in, and I think that's good. It's 7:15, and Matthew is wondering when we can start choir practice, and so we're going to come to an end. Friends, would you, let's have a word of prayer to close, okay? Gracious God, we give you thanks for the wisdom of the ages, for the ability for big institutions like the United Methodist Church to change over time. And we know how difficult those changes come, and we know that for some it's a change in a direction that maybe we don't want to go. But we really do believe that overall you are at work and can work in and through a whole denomination as well as through a local congregation. And we ask that you work through us, because it's not this building that is United Methodist, it's we who are your people. So send us out this night, help us reflect together, give us courage to ask and question one another so that we can learn and deepen our connections and therefore be ready to serve you with love. Be with us this night, and we pray for your peace and love always. Amen.